Hey, welcome back. You're watching a Freaky Friday edition. I am surrounded by Don Julio 1942 today for one reason and one reason only. It is International Tequila Day. And on Liquid Lunch, you know, we like to flip back a cold one every so often. And when it's Tequila Day, we do as the tequilites do. We drink Don Julio. And I'm having a freshly brewed margarita mix that I made up this morning. And we're going to do a little Liquid Lunch overtime session today. And we have a lot to talk about in overtime because I'm allowed to use a little more adult language in that segment. But for now, as I've been saying for weeks, months, if not the last year, the silent majority, us, the regular people, the regular folk, need to start to speak up. You always hear, well, the silent majority will come out. No. We need more grassroots, proactive efforts to bring the voice of the people to the streets, because the voice of the minority right now, this Marxist BLM Antifa movement, is wagging the dog. And we, the Americans who were born and bred here and believe in our country and the freedoms and liberties that our soldiers have fought for years, are not doing enough, if you ask me. And a guy who figured that out a while ago and is an expert in many things, but grassroots organization and giving a new group a big voice, joins us right now. Michael Johns is with us every Friday. He's one of the co-founders of the Tea Party movement. And Mike, I swear to God, we need you now more than ever, because there's so much crap going on. I did a segment last week on how through Freedom of Information Act, there's empirical proof that the Central Intelligence Agency has an Office of Hollywood Engagement where they actually share information with Hollywood studios and TV cable operators and radio stations that they want to program into the minds of America. And it's happening every day. There's over-reporting, there's under-reporting. People don't even know there's masks, there's no masks. What's happening here, and how can people band together to kind of cut through all the bull?
I mean, first, just on this issue of grassroots activism, I mean, I have done just about everything that you can do in American politics. I mean, I worked at the most influential conservative think tank in the world in Washington, D.C. I worked in the nonprofit advocacy organizations. I worked in the U.S. Senate. I worked in the White House. And I think ultimately when we launched the Tea Party movement in 2009, I pretty quickly came to the conclusion that this is the singular most effective means for influencing American politics. I mean, you could sit there and write white papers in Washington, D.C. forever, and I don't want to diminish the value of some of that intellectual work. But we're right now in a fight for the country, and I think you raise a very legitimate point that we're not bringing the sort of battle to this fight that is reflective of what's actually at stake. I mean, we're saying that the country's at stake, but you sure wouldn't know it based on our movement's grassroots activism. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you look at where our donor money goes and out of foundations and even individual donations, by and large, flows into these DC-based organizations that are important, but they're much more slow-paced. You know, I recognized that last week when you and I talked about Iran, and I was trying to make a lot of urgent moves to try to save the lives of these 3 young Iranians, and kind of a lukewarm response from a lot of organizations who say they care about human rights around the world. Some jumped on it, but I would say even more, a greater number didn't, and it sort of teaches you a lesson that maybe we're making a mistake putting all this responsibility and thinking that that our issues are going to be solved down there. I think it continues to be with the people, and we need to unite. And unfortunately, conservatives have more of an individualist approach to a lot of things. So ultimately, that's not the way that you get things done in politics. You get it done through collective collaboration. We need more mindset around that, No, 1 + 1 = 3 in political activism.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? The weird thing is, you got, maybe 6 or 7 hot spots around the country where you got these liberal mayors who are letting these thugs and looters and rioters and, they're trying to defund the police. In Washington, she said it's going to be the summer of love. So you got these little hot spots where you got 5,000, 10,000 people. And if you put them all together, I look at it, maybe it's 100,000 people that are out in the streets. Many of them are paid protesters. It's a minuscule amount of our country, and they're controlling the dialogue to a point. I don't know if you watched opening night of MLB last night, but they actually had Black Lives Matter tattooed on the mound, and all the players from the Yankees and the Nationals had Black Lives Matter. And I don't understand, either the leadership doesn't know that this is a Marxist organization, or the leadership knows it's a Marxist organization and wants the country to think that's good for us. I'm lost.
Well, I think I can answer that one. They want to make the easy, non-controversial decisions. So when you have a very aggressive Marxist organization knocking on your door, basically extorting you in a way, saying we can go down path A where you do these things that we want, or you can go down path B where we launch a boycott. Path A almost always ends up being the easier path, and then you get a kind of momentum behind it. So after Major League Baseball does it, I mean, what professional sport doesn't feel the obligation to kind of fall in line? And Major League Baseball has probably arguably been the least politicized of all of the major sports.
Yeah, the NBA
usually politicized.
Yeah, you got the NBA
guy in Hong Kong. You know, he was forced to kind of, after he just put out a few words supporting the protests in Hong Kong, they jumped all over him, made him retract the statement, delete his statement, apologize for his statement, and his statement was completely right. You know, to stand with the people of Hong Kong for freedom and
scary. And then you got the LeBron Jameses of the world, who, you know, Nike wants little kids to look up to, and he's talking about reparations for slavery. He's talking about being oppressed by the white man, and at the same time, he's making hundreds of millions of dollars from China, where they're making these Nike shoes, and they have these Uyghurs that they've basically enslaved, and they got them working in factories making Nikes for free. And LeBron James is collecting all that dough. The king's putting it in his pockets. He don't care about the peasants.
If you're doing business with communist China right now, you have no standing on the issue of human rights. Human rights is not important to you. So, you know, King James has got 2 million Uyghurs that are being held in re-education concentration camps under horrific conditions, disappearances, torture, re-education, forcing these individuals to violate all the tenets of their religious and ethnic identity. It is horrific. And fortunately, I think we saw a great statement by Secretary of State Pompeo yesterday on China. I think we finally, after 40 years of this, listening to these purported experts and sinologists who've had it wrong, gotten it right. But you raised the biggest, I think you're onto an issue that's really on my mind right now, is that I can't believe corporate America has been so penetrated by this radical ideology that they obviously don't, at the end of the day, support. I mean, you have an organization that's got a great name, and you and I, we both know, we believe Black Lives Matter. Okay, so props to the person who threw that name on a Marxist organization, because what they're doing has almost nothing to do with that. You know, to the extent there's law enforcement or legal issues or our penal system or any of those things that are impeding on the literal physical lives of African Americans, we want to stop that. We're all on board with that.
No doubt. And you know, if you go to, I talked about this yesterday, you go to any of these, they're spending millions of dollars on promoting social media ads for Black Lives Matter, right? And if you click on donate on many of these ads, it takes you to this site called Act Blue, right? And Act Blue is this
social, the Democrat Party.
Yeah, it's a social justice nonprofit, so your contributions are not tax deductible. But in our final minute, I will just tell you that if you look at where all of their advocacy goes, Planned Parenthood, NAACP, $1 billion to Democratic candidates, is this a front organization for Soros?
Well, you can look back at the, let's just start with the ideology. I mean, you go back and look at the statements of the founders. They said they were highly trained Marxists. Then you look at the positions they've taken on everything, they're completely radicalized. And the problem, which we started this conversation out with, is these organizations, including companies, need to be pressed back into a position of neutrality. Obviously, no racism permitted in any component of society. We're all stamp that out. We don't need Marxist organizations to do that.
No
and
doubt.
frankly, we just had 8 years of an African-American president who didn't do anything on these issues.
No question about it. It's getting crazy, brother. We got to put our heads together and figure out a way, or some way I could help you reignite the base and get people to speak up. We're going to leave it there, but thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right.
And
Thank you, buddy.
I'll
Have a
reach
good
out
weekend.
to you over the weekend. We'll put our heads together a little bit. All right, that's Michael Johns, former speechwriter for George H.W. Bush and also one of the co-founders of the Tea Party movement. We're celebrating International Tequila Day for the rest of the day. Stay right there. Have one with us. We'll be back in a flash.